Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another session of MedTech Unplugged. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. If you're new here, just a quick reminder that you can catch all of our previous MedTech Unplugged episodes on our website at mynavro.com under the webinar section, as well as on our YouTube channel under Navro MedTech Recruiting. And we also have sessions available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so wherever you like to get your content. If you want to continue to learn from leaders across the industry, those sessions are absolutely worth digging into. And please hit that subscribe button to help us to continue to bring you incredible speakers like the one we have today. So I'm very excited to introduce today's speaker in our discussion about from concept to cardiac device, Dr. Laila Sabet. She holds a PhD in mechanical engineering, and she is the director of product development for Abbott's cardiac rhythm management division. And she's one of the rare leaders who brings deep clinical insight, engineering rigor, and a future-focused view of where device innovation is heading. Her work sits at the intersection of electrophysiology and next-generation device design, exactly the place where great ideas turn into real-world solutions. She spent her career shaping products that don't just function, they meaningfully change patient care. And she has a talent for translating complex science into practical thinking for engineers, early career professionals, and anyone who wants to understand how medtech actually gets built. Today, we'll discuss how concepts become prototypes, how prototypes evolve into devices, and how leaders navigate the messy middle where innovation either dies or breaks through. And we'll learn about her career journey and what her day in the life is like. So please help me welcome Dr. Laila Sabet.
Thank you, Jenny. Thanks for that amazing introduction.
We're happy to have you. So before we dive in, a lot of the folks on our call today are soon-to-be graduates or newly graduating folks from engineering and other health science degrees. Can you explain a little bit to them about what your division is all about, what cardiac rhythm management is about, what your team works on, and the types of devices they work on? I think that'd be real helpful for them to have a starting framework.
Sounds great. Thanks, Jenny. Thanks for having me on this event tonight. I'm happy to share what I have, and hopefully it'll be helpful for the audience. So here at Abbott CRM, or Cardiac Rhythm Management, we sort of deal with the electrical abnormalities of the heart. So some of you may be familiar, some may not. Our heart functions with electrical activation, and sometimes things don't work as well as they should. So the devices that we make are categorically designed to deal with some of these abnormalities. So we have devices called pacemakers that deal with the heart if they're not beating as fast as they should. We make devices called cardiac defibrillators that can basically shock you out of ventricular tachycardia or ventricular fibrillation that can lead to you can lose your life if you are in those arrhythmias. We also make cardiac monitors, which are sort of implantable devices where continuously monitor your heart's activity, and these are connected devices that send the information to your physicians. So that's sort of the and we actually also do resynchronization therapy, which is for patients that the right side of the heart and the left side of the heart don't contract properly at the same time, and that's another therapy that's available in the implantable cardiac devices. So that's as a whole kind of what the cardiac rhythm management is about. But the technology, and we can get into it later, is pretty broad, and almost every discipline of engineering you can think of works to make all of this happen and come to reality as therapy to patients.
There must be a lot of collaboration that you have to, embody and embrace within the work that you do every day.
Yes, that's very true. I think one of the attributes, I think, of MedTech that resonates very much with me is that collaborative nature of it. it's really coming together. Like you have to embrace the clinical application, sort of the unmet clinical need in the healthcare industry. There is the engineering function, the technology engineering function, but there is regulatory, there is quality, there's post-market surveillance, there is manufacturing, there's operations, there's all sorts of things that have to come together to ultimately bring that therapy to the patients. And it's extremely collaborative. I mean, my background is engineering. I'm part of our research and development organization. Even within our research and development organization, we have many different functions of engineering that have to come together to make these therapies a reality for patients.
And you hold degrees, you hold your undergrad as well as your PhD in and your master's in mechanical engineering.
Correct.
Did you know that was the route you always wanted to go as, a young girl, or how did you choose this?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it definitely, it was not, I woke up one day and say I want to be an engineer and making medical devices, implantable cardiac devices. That's not how it ended up working out. But it was sort of step by step sort of things that happened in life and brought me here. But I have to say, I was thinking before calling in this meeting, I have to say it's a very, ultimately it's very personal. Everybody's career is very personal and it has to resonate with you. But I ended up in the right place. I think I did end up in the right place. It's work is work. There's times that it's tough. There's parts of it that you never enjoy, and there's part of it that you really like. But I think the mission of what we do that really resonates well with me, and ultimately we have these devices in patients. It's their life depends on it. So that's really something that resonates really well with me. So I'm glad I ended up here, but did I all along think I'm going to end up in med devices? I don't think so. I think for the longest time, I think in undergrad at least, I thought I was going to end up in energy sector. So
Hey, yeah, those very different arenas there. So
yes.
how did your early career kind of start, and how did you navigate into the world you're into now?
Yeah. So, I mean, for your audience, some of your audience might also be in this situation. So I did my undergrad in a different country and then moved to United States for grad school. So very early stage, like after I did my bachelor's, I worked maybe for 2, 3 months in my home country, and that was in energy sector. But when I transitioned here and started sort of, so I did my undergrad in mechanical engineering, and I was highly focused on fluid dynamics. I don't know if there's any mechanical engineers. I was doing CFD modeling and a lot of sort of simulation work and that sort of work. But then when I came here, for 1 year actually I continued doing that, but then kind of realized this is going to land me either in energy or in defense industry. And I was like, that's not where I want to be when I grow up. So at that point, I actually switched labs and sort of restarted my master's and PhD trajectory in a different lab in focused in MEMS nanotechnology and biotechnology, and pivoted. And it was it was I didn't know I'm going to end up in med device when I made that switch, but all I knew at that point was I did not want to end up in defense. So
Yes, yes. Well, that's great. You had that kind of forward thinking early enough on to make that pivotal switch into where you want to be. Because I'm sure when you're considering, okay, I've already invested this much time and energy down this path, it's not always easy to just pivot. So,
yep.
but to your point, having that passion about what you do and really seeing is this where I want to be? Is this not where I want to be? Led you to where you are today. And
Yep.
how big is the team that you lead?
I have a team of about 5 engineers and scientists. I would call them, they're not very big, but they're mighty. We are a mighty team.
Wearing a
We
lot of
are,
hats, probably.
yes, we are considered sort of clinical engineers as well as applied researchers. So we tackle a lot of the early stage development. So we do a lot of R&T, but like research and technology sort of feasibility and looking at is this new technology or is this new variation of something we want to offer possible. So our team spends a lot of time even looking into what is the right model for me to even evaluate this therapy. And because as you move into something new, you might not even have the right model to evaluate and assess the technology. So we have a lot of that in my team where we spend early stage development, but then as the technology matures and it gets ready to go into development, my team wears the hat of what here at Abbott CRM call clinical engineers. And MedTech device, you probably know, is a regulated industry. So we have to work under design controls and standards, and we have everything goes through depending on geography, goes to the regulatory body. So in the design control environments, the clinical engineers own what's called the user needs and as well as the validation. So it's really the definition of what you wanna develop, documented properly and under certain rules, as well as ultimately showing. So we do have these user needs, and then the rest of the engineering team will go develop this or realize these user needs into what we call requirements, and then they actually manifest it in a product. And then at that point, that product gets through what's called verification against requirements to show that this product is meeting those requirements. And ultimately, we do what's called validation, that's testing against the user needs, that ultimately showing the device is doing what I initially intended it to do. And so the user needs and validation is part of the work that my team delivers as part of the design control for a full product development. And then the other thing I like to think of what our team does is we're sort of the champions of the product, and we are the sort of voice of the patient throughout the product development cycle in that product. Because again, like our devices are pretty complicated. You hear pacemakers that have been around since the 50s, but there's a lot of engineering and a lot of different parts to it. And along the development cycle, a lot of decisions have to be made. One person cannot always be there, but where my team comes in is they really play that kind of clinician representing the patient and the final use of the device throughout the development cycle at every stop where decisions have to be made.
That's no small feat. And that validation that it's doing exactly what you intended to do, does it always go smoothly? Or, I mean, I can't imagine that it does. Is it common to run into hurdles? What do you do at that point? Do you have to restart everything? What does a typical sort of path down that progress look like in terms of
Yeah.
speed bumps and, complete detours?
Right. So we like to not have any issues in validation because that's sort of the last stop before you submit a product, and you have timelines and there's deliverables and business goals. Reality is that that's not always the case, but you do enough. So it's not like you wait till the validation where you try things out. All along the way, you sort of test drive or dry run that validation flow. You sort of need that anyways as you are finalizing your design and you're making sure that your design is right for what you want the therapy to do. So hopefully we don't see bumps in the road in the validation, but that's not always the case. And if that happens, you have to come up with strategies of how to tackle that, and it can be sometimes just elaborations of what went wrong and explanation of why we don't anticipate this to happen in workplace, as from the range of responses from that all the way to potentially repeat of the testing. So that's the spectrum of situations that you may have to manage in a failed validation, but you typically don't have a failed validation, or it would be just a small piece of it that might have some issues.
A little bit of tweaking, a little bit of fine tuning.
Yep.
So I would imagine your team is doing a lot of testing, a lot of evaluating, a lot of assessing on a day to day, and you're overseeing them. So what are you able to stay as connected to the engineering of it all? Or, you probably, I would imagine, have a lot of responsibilities just managing the team. How do you straddle sort of both of those roles?
Yeah, that's I think the other part, what we do, what my team does as well, is we spend a good amount of time also in the field with the clinicians,
Okay.
to kind of see how our existing products are being used, how are they. I think that's part of the part of both from a product design, knowing the unmet need as well as the right way to validate, because you do want to validate these devices in a environment that as much as possible replicates the real world scenario of how that product will end up getting used. That's, I would say, a good chunk of our team's time is also spent in the field. So now back to your question, how do I, so, we, at some point in life, you have to come to the realization that we can't do it all, and you have to trust, and you have to work with other people to get things done. I rely heavily on my team. I do try to get we sit together and we kind of go over their work and their analysis, and frankly, a lot of times I'm learning from them with respect to some of the new methods of how you can potentially analyze something. Yeah, I'm not necessarily doing nitty gritty analysis myself anymore, but I think I want to think I spent enough time with my team going through results, or sometimes sitting with them, to both learn as well as help them refine the analysis that they need to do. And then there's the other part of it is the applicability of the analysis and applicability of the work to how this will become realized in the product. And I think the more that I don't know if the older I get or the longer I stay in industry, the more and more I'm appreciating the sort of stages of life or stages of development where, I think the longer you stay, or I don't know, the older you become, things fall into place a little bit more. And you kind of start seeing how your story is coming together a little bit better than when you initially start the process as an entry-level engineer, for example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you touched on, I think, what's such an important and sometimes not understood piece of the industry is that collaboration with the clinicians in the field that are using your devices. These devices aren't thought up and conceptualized in a vacuum, in a lab, just in a building someplace, and then packaged up neatly, and here you go. I would imagine it's where a lot of the ideas or innovations come from, is just that experience in discussing with physicians their experience with the product, what they like, what they don't like, what the hurdles are, what are some unmet needs. And then also thinking of that, you had mentioned sort of the voice of the patient. So I don't know if you're able to share, or if you can think of some of those innovations that you've been able to work on that might have come from that experience with working with clinicians, the users of your products, or hearing from or being in the mindset of the patients. And those are some things that your team worked on, if you can share.
Yeah, so I think I can talk about actually a pretty simple but very clever example. I'm looking around my office to see if I have demos to show. So we in cardiac rhythm management, we have these things called leads that they actually literally get attached to the heart. They literally get screwed into the heart tissue, and that's basically the wire that transfers the energy from the can to the heart tissue. Unless you're working with a leadless pacemaker, that's a newer technology that does not have leads. But anyways, we can put that aside for the time being. So these leads, they do have a helix at the end that gets screwed out. And well, there's one new application of how we deliver therapy. And then these leads were designed to actually just attach to the endocardium. So these helixes will get extended and they just attach to the tissue. But there's one new kind of therapy called conduction system pacing or left bundle branch area pacing, where to deliver the therapy, you would want to place this lead deeper in the tissue and get closer to the LV endocardium on coming from the right side. So what happens is with our leads, because this helix is designed to, it gets deployed and but it's a retractable helix. So as you apply pressure, this screw will come back. There are these other leads in marketplace that have fixed helix. And so in order to enable delivery of the therapy deep in the septum with our leads, one thing that our clinicians had to tackle was managing of that helix pushing back. So one of the brilliant engineers within the team, it was not directly my team, but within the bigger R&D team, came up with a design of a very small tool that basically holds the fixture, holds what drives that extension of the helix and keeps it out. So then when you are borrowing the lead into the tissue, your helix does not retract back. So I think that's a great example of how just looking at the workflow and what the clinician needs as the therapy had evolved to make our tools readily, like as fast as possible, available to enable that delivery of the therapy. That was just brilliant, genius design of a very simple tool that just solves the problem. So I think that's a great example of how just understanding the need, you can potentially come up with a pretty simple solution to help that clinical workflow and enable a new therapy for the patients.
Yeah. And so from concept to kind of creation and delivery, how long, for example, did that very
So that's a good question. That one is easier because it's just considered an accessory. I mean, ultimately, we're in medical device, and a lot of our devices are called class 3. So they can take up to at least 6 months of review cycle by the regulatory body. Plus, depending on the complexity of the design and complexity of what you're putting out, there's a certain amount of testing that needs to be done. So a lot of it is not just, did I design it right? There is a lot of work that happens in between before you get something ready to, and you have enough evidence to show that something is safe and effective. For example, that tool is relatively simple, quick turnaround time. But if now you think about a feature that wants to be added to a pacemaker or defibrillator, that would be much longer. It'll just take longer. Again, depends on the complexity of what we're dealing with. The time cycle will be very different. But in MedTech, things are much longer than tech. So it's just, and I think for a good reason. There's a lot at stake when it comes to therapy, like life-depending therapy. You do want to have extra eyes on what's being done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can imagine when you're developing something that's a complete, paradigm shift. You mentioned, your devices, and they have the leads that are screwed directly into the heart. And now we also have leadless pacemakers. Like that's a complete new innovation. So that must take, I think, from concept to creation to delivery into patients, an incredible amount of time and development and validation, which is
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Speaking of teams, you had touched on this earlier too. There's so many different folks with different specialties that have involvement in this. How how does that sort of collaboration get fostered from, the different engineers and scientists to, everything from just fine tuning the idea on a piece of paper down to packaging? How does that collaboration kind of get fostered? Because there's just so many, and I can imagine it could be difficult at times to make sure all the teams are talking together, everybody's on the same page where they need to be. Certainly you have things that your team works on that, supply chain management doesn't need to be aware of, but what does that dance look like?
Right. So I think, I mean, here at Abbott, I'm pretty sure a lot of bigger companies that have a lot of cross collaboration, cross-functional work that needs to be done. There's sort of, I don't want to call it process, but there is maybe we can call it process of how you end up working with each other. So there are groups that typically kind of cluster and work closer together, but that kind of like keeps going down the chain to where it needs to go. For example, if you think about you have a clinical need and you come up with a design. Initially, it's sort of the R&D team, but then a lot of times we also leverage our field team that are actually our boots on the grounds and are dealing with these products all the time. So we sometimes bring them in because they can provide. So I can be at implants every once in a while, but these are the people that are every day at implants. So sometimes we bring them into the picture to kind of hear additional considerations we may want to have as this device or this product gets deployed. We have our marketing team, and they'll do their business case analysis, they'll do the clinical marketing analysis, and then you sort of decide on the scope of the program, and then you kind of pass it down to what we call it core team of that will be all the sorts of functions that will have a role in that, and that's inclusive of all sorts of engineering, the regulatory, the quality, the people like at some point manufacturing transfer. But then let's say in that realm, like let's say the product is on the mechanical side, they will work closer to the mechanical team to start thinking about how do we make sure that the design is such that it's scalable at manufacturing. So like things such as cost of manufacturing, components of manufacturing, like supply chain, all of that conversations also happen. So that you are starting to design something with that vision that you want this to be scalable, and you can produce it at a cost that's ultimately it's a business, so you want to make sure that it's profitable. So that's one pathway. But then in the regulatory, and then you have like multiple geographies, so it's not just US. You have regulatory experts that we're a global company, we sell globally, so you kind of work with all the different regions to bring in all the considerations that needs to be put in place with respect to what are some of the testing, or what are some of the standards or some of the requirements for geospecific as you want to bring that product forward. So I think that those are some of like the collaborations that we talk about that need to happen. But again, like global regulatory does not necessarily need to talk about supply chain, but there is sort of clusters of group that kind of work together to ensure that product, as much as possible, is applicable to all geographies. And sometimes the conversation is, do I need to launch this product in every geography? Some products just potentially make sense for a certain geography, or even like features. Like we work with marketing as like, these are the set of features that make sense for this geography, but these are the other features that would make sense in another geography. So there's a lot of sort of collaborative, cross-functional work that happens, and decisions that are made through these forums along the way.
Mm-hmm. It's exciting. There's a lot going on. So I don't even know, this is going to then feel like a very subjective question, but what is a good day in the life for you? What's a frustrating day in the life for you? I guess in general, what is a day in the life for you?
I come to accept the good day and a frustrating day can both happen within a 30-minute time. You can have a win in one place, and you can have massive loss in another place. But yeah, I think we spend a lot of time. So I have to say, if I have to be honest, I do spend a lot of time in meetings. So this cross collaboration comes at a cost of a lot of talking. Can we be more efficient about it? Maybe. So it's there's a lot of meetings that I have to attend. But besides that, again, like I think my day can be variable with respect to, I do go to different. I do like to be in the field and see cases in action. We do a lot of preclinical testing. So that happens at the lab. So I think we touched upon it a little bit, like different models and how do you evaluate a design in a particular model. So I spend a good chunk of time in different lab facilities, and they can be geographically all over the place. I do spend time with my team, kind of catching up with them with what they do. And what else would my day look like? But it's very dynamic, and you have multiple projects going on, so you sometimes have wins and sometimes things don't go as planned. And the worst, I would say, the worst of the worst is when there are field issues. Like if there's something happens with a device that's implanted in the patient, I think that's always becomes priority number one for everyone in the company. So I think that would become everybody's highest priority to manage and make sure that the right steps are taken and the right thing is done. So I would say that's ultimately the worst of the worst if from a scale of setbacks. But otherwise, you can have a testing that results don't go as planned, and you sort of, have to get together with a team and do a root cause analysis. What went wrong? What happened? Does the test setup need to be updated? What went wrong? So that can happen. And the wins, you can have success. We can be successful at implants. We do actually, the other thing my team does, we do publications. So that's a big part of it. Except getting your publication accepted is a celebration. Or
Absolutely.
regulatory approvals are big celebrations. Launch days, like when the product launches in different geographies, are big celebrations and big wins. But again, I mean, we can celebrate a successful validation. That's a celebration. So it can be, yeah. I think there's highs and lows, and they can be within the same day pretty quickly from each other.
That's good that you can have highs and lows within the same day, because it's if you have a nice balance of the two, then that's always good. You don't want to be moving too much in the low direction. Any little
Yes.
forward. And we're going to open it up to questions here in just a minute or so, but I know you can't share proprietary things, so I'm certainly not asking that. But what do you envision? What would you be most excited to see about in terms of innovation within your specific sector in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so it's the pacing has evolved quite a bit, and there is a lot of interest in both leadless pacing as well as this new sort of modality of delivering therapy called conduction system pacing. So there's also a lot of excitement on the merger of the two. So from sort of mode of delivery of the therapy, that's in the next year or two, that's where I am mostly invested and excited about. Um, but at the same time, there is definitely room for additional innovation. So you can always, one thing that we always battle is longevity. Like everybody wants a longer lasting device. So there is definitely room and opportunity to do to look at alternative technologies and alternative, or like energy harvesting, or the all sorts of different modalities of how do you bring that into a medical device, which I mean, I don't think in 2 years can happen, but it's of beyond just bringing leadless and conduction system pacing. I think there's just still a lot that you can do from a technology perspective within, but for delivering the same therapy.
So there's exciting things to come for sure. Fun
Yes,
things to work on, especially for an engineer.
definitely. I would say cardiac rhythm management is engineering heaven. It's you can do anything, software, firmware, mechanical, material, all of it, all the above.
Well, then it's a wide open field. So these are candidates who are on the call today. Quite a few do come from an engineering background, so they're in the right space. And the ones that don't, we have quite a few from different health science backgrounds, but all of them are interested in pursuing med tech. So it sounds like there's opportunities and roles all across the board for everybody. I'm just taking a look at some of the questions. One question that came through, and the question was, and I apologize because this might have come through early on, and I'm just now seeing it. And the question is, what does it mean when you need the right model to evaluate a new technology?
Yeah, good question. So when you, for example, when you want to assess, let me think what's the best way to respond to this. When you want to basically assess the efficacy of a therapy, um, you want so obviously the ultimate beneficiary of this therapy is human, but we can't necessarily experiment in humans. So it'll become, are we doing modeling to get some answers? Are we doing benchtop testing to get some answers? And we do some preclinical testing to sort of, like, that's sometimes the closest we can get before we go to a human, if we need to do a human trial or just immediately go to humans. So it'll be looking at the preclinical models is what I meant to talk about. And then, for example, like an anatomy of different preclinical models might be slightly different than humans. So you have to make sure the aspect of the design that you're validating and the aspect of the design you're evaluating with respect to the part of the anatomy that it will interact with, that is the right model. So if, for example, I'm looking for the correct orientation of like how the right atrium sits on top of the right ventricle, I have to select a model that well represents what it'll be in a human model. That's what I meant.
Got it. Okay. And there's a couple more questions that came in. So I'm going to invite the audience. If you have questions, please go ahead, put them in the chat, raise your hand, and we'll get your questions answered. But one that came up, let me grab it right here, came through the email. And it's interesting because we talked about your early sort of career trajectory, and you had that pivot shift. And the question that came in was how important you feel it is to pick that specialty early on in their career. And in your view, how flexible should they remain in order to, I guess, see potential opportunities? So how important it is to pick that, and how should they, how flexible should they be in terms of seeing opportunities that come? And that may be also a subjective question right there, but I will give it to you.
To me, yes. Yeah, I mean, reality is we can't control everything and we can't predict how our life is going to play out. I think I am of the mindset that you need to be open to opportunities and you have to do your best and bring the best of yourself to every opportunity you end up picking. And also know that, like, that's not the end of it. Like, as you start something and as you show your capabilities and as you bring your best to that work, the environment will also help you move towards what your interests are and where you can develop further. I do believe that's really the case. And ultimately, I think everybody's story is theirs, and everybody come to this experience with their own background, education background, kind of personality, and you make the same role with the same people is not going to end up being the same thing. You ultimately bring and make that role for you. And the longer I stay in the in industry, I think the more I see it, and I truly believe that you ultimately, again, like there's no two identical engineers will have the same experience in the same role. There's a lot of the elements that your experience and your personality will bring into how that role gets evolved and where you can go from there.
I think that's excellently put. Excellently put. I have a question that came in here. Here we go. Okay, I was curious about when working with clinicians to get patient feedback and about how that system looks in practice. Do you directly speak with them and have them as part of your team, or is it more like a customer service-based system? And I think you're probably speaking of, maybe like the clinical field technicians, but I'll let you go ahead and
Yeah.
share.
No, that's actually a good question. We do work with physicians, so there's different levels of interactions with the physicians. I would say the most involved, where we work very closely with, first of all, you have to make sure that both your IP and whatever the physician may have from prior IP is protected, because when it comes to looking at new design and potentially come up with new designs, there's obviously ownership of IP involved. So with select few physicians that we've worked very closely in development, it starts from putting the right paperwork together to just make sure they're protected with whatever idea they've ever had, and we're protected with whatever we're going to develop. And then at that point, then, some of these physicians we work extremely closely with, but it's not every physician. Like, they need to also have the open mind to get into the very early stage development and have that open mindset and ability to see where can this evolve in. So sort of, I'm kind of go down the spectrum of the different types of engagements that we have. So that's kind of like a very tight-knit relationship, very kind of smaller group of physicians that we work with. But then as you kind of evolve and you have something a little bit more concrete, then you do want to get feedback, put it in the hands of additional physicians, and kind of just make sure that it works for a majority of physicians. So then at that point, you don't necessarily need that physicians to be super open to understanding how this will evolve, because now your product is a little bit more at a point that, but then you do want that close relationship. You do want them to be open and give you honest feedback, so you can you don't want people to just come and say, oh, it's great. You do want them to be critical and like truly give you that. And then I think at the kind of later stages, as you commercialize a product, as they use, then we have our field team that support them. And then in case there are, and then, our engineering team goes and tries to also learn from that experience and learn from their experiences and kind of see the product in action. And there's that level of engagement as well. Mm-hmm. So it comes in a lot of different forms. But I think it's one of the interesting parts of the MedTech, that collaboration kind of understanding, is that two sides have to come together. And I think cardiac rhythm management, we work with electrophysiologists, and electrophysiologists in some ways they do have like an engineering mindset too. So it's a fun collaboration. I enjoy it.
That's true. They do have an engineering mindset. We had another that just got emailed in. I'm just checking, and it says, just talking about global launching of devices. And the question was, and I actually found it very fascinating, what cultural or regulatory surprises have you encountered when going through the process of launching devices internationally?
Yeah, so the regulatory is interesting. Some, like, for example, what has been very interesting to me has been China. And they sometimes they want you to send samples, so they do the testings themselves. So that's been, I would say, one of the most interesting ones I've seen so far. With respect to launching products, I don't think it's so much a cultural. I mean, one thing I can say, naming a product, you have to really be careful with the global aspect and making sure that what you're naming the product will work in all regions. I would say launching its product I don't have like response to cultural, but there is definitely how the healthcare system works in that region plays a role with respect to reimbursement. Are they private systems? Are they public systems? So that kind of plays a role. But I don't know if I can respond to culture and launching. I mean, there's definitely cultural aspects when you're interacting with clinicians from other parts of the world. But I can't come up with a good response for launching a product with cultural sensitivity, other than to make sure the name works in all geos.
Naming is hard. Naming
Very
is
hard.
one of the hardest parts of launching a new product. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we've got a few more minutes, so if anyone has questions, now's your time. Please raise your hand. We can unmute you or send them in the chat. Okay, we've got one that just came in. How do you identify the scope of a product? I have had to work on some prototypes for my course projects in assistive tech, and I have had a hard time finding the sweet spot for having a target. It's a great question.
Yes, great question. Yeah, so I think it's a lot of the balance of a lot of times is timelines. How much can the team deliver by what timeline? And going through a prioritization with respect to if I have 10 things I can implement, but it will take me 3 years, but I really want to develop it and implement it in a year and a half, which ones am I going to prioritize? So a lot of time is that. And then the other thing is, within the features you are able to develop, really understanding which ones will make the biggest impact. But when you're doing that, you really have to think futuristic, like thinking, because again, medical device, the development cycles are longer. They don't happen in a month or two. So let's say it takes a year and a half. So you really have to think by the time this is ready in a year and a half, like have that lens and think about the value of each of those features at that time. And then you have to also think competitively, like know your competition and know what they're coming out with, and sometimes going to guess and look at market intelligence information and understand what do we anticipate our competition to be out with in that similar time frame that we're coming out. So those are some, again, and then like business cases of, coming up with ROIs from different sort of versions of this product, and cost, and how much will this take and how long will it take. So I think all of that comes together through rounds and rounds of assessments before we settle. So that scoping will take some time. It's not a it's not a quick decision, and and sometimes you end up having different strategies for different geographies. So that's another consideration. Some features might be of a lot of value in some geographies, but not as much in others. So that, again, I think becomes to a lot of balancing considerations. Ultimately, cost and timelines will drive some of those decisions.
Mm-hmm. And help you sort of iron out or focus in that scope.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one last question that we'll end on, and this is more of on a personal note. So when you're not immersed in pacing systems and regulatory strategy, what are your personal hobbies to keep you recharged and ready for the next?
I have to go back to my stages of life statement that I said earlier. I am at the stage where I think, I think it's one of the busiest times in your life. I have 2 young children. I work full time. So hobby, I don't know. So if I have time, I like to be outdoors. I live in Southern California, so that's helpful. If I just have the ability to connect with nature by going by the beach or a hike, but it's not very fancy, to be honest. It's really embracing my life, spending time with my children, and seeing my parents, and being able to kind of go out and about in nature is what I can time wise afford, and I'm happy with it. I've embraced this part of my life, and it will not stay for like this forever. But it's the reality of it now.
It is. You're in the thick of it.
Yes,
You want to respect your time. We had two more questions that came in. Are you okay with time?
sure. Why don't we do that?
Okay. So the question is, what skill and special acknowledgement do you or the team expect for a new grad in biomedical engineering? If I'm working on another type of medical device not related to a cardiac device, would it still be helpful to the team?
Sorry, do you mind repeating the question? I got distracted.
No problem. So the question is, what skill and special acknowledgement do you or the team expect for a new grad in biomedical engineering? If I'm working on another type of medical device not related to cardiac device, would it still be helpful to the team?
Yeah, I think yes, a great question. I think coming in, especially starting, if you have any medical device experience, that's helpful. Um, I think coming in knowing you are going to be in a collaborative environment, being open to that collaboration, having a can-do attitude, and I'm here to learn and I'm here to evolve. I think those and having some medical device experience, it's all helpful. The nice thing about med devices, again, because it's all regulated, having worked under a regulated environment, that part of it is translatable. I mean, the technology part of it might not. I mean, the anatomy, physiology, the disease state might not, but the sort of the regulation and working under those regulations is transferable and translatable to our division as well.
That's great news. Well, thank you so much. I think I want to be respectful. You've given us so much of your time,
Yeah.
and you do have that other part of your life waiting for you. So thank you again, Dr. Sabet, for joining us. And thank you, everyone, for participating and just for leaning into your own growth in this industry. If you'd like to revisit anything from today or explore past episodes, everything's available on mynavro.com under webinars, as well as on our YouTube channel, Navro MedTech Recruiting, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Please don't forget to stay connected with us on social. You can follow us on Instagram at Navro MedTech Recruiting, TikTok at Navro_recruiting, as well as LinkedIn to keep up with everything on our webinars, job tips, MedTech insights, and upcoming speakers. Thank you again for being here today. Thank you again so much, Dr. Sabet, for your gracious time and insight. We greatly appreciate it. For everyone else, I hope this sparks something new for you, and I look forward to seeing you on the next MedTech Unplugged webinar. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.